After 5 p.m. local time in Benghazi, the French president, flanked by the head of the National Transitional Council, the British Prime Minister, their two foreign ministers, and scenes of whooping joy.
Vive Benghazi! Vive la Libye! Vive l'amitié entre la France et la Libye!
Almost tinges of General de Gaulle there, stirring the crowd on the day that Paris was stirring the crowd, almost in remembrance sort of General de Gaulle on the day that Paris was freed from the Nazis. Nicolas Sarkozy, certainly as you can see, savoring the moment. Not everyone, though, is euphoric. The Gaddafi is still at large. There's signs of infighting among Tripoli's new rulers. And if Libya is the kind of precedent NATO wants to tout, well, what are you going to do, for instance, about Syria, today marking 6 months of a brutal crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators? Today, in the France 24 debate, we're asking if it's mission accomplished. And joining us from London, British Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn is with us. From the Paris suburb of Maison-Lafitte, Member of Parliament of the French Parliament, Jacques Millard of France's ruling UMP party, welcome. From Cairo, Wahid Bershan of the National Transitional Council, President of the local council in Garian District, thank you for being with us. And here in the studio, Jean-Marie Fardeau of Human Rights Watch. We want to thank all of you also for weighing in on the discussion on the France 24 debate Facebook page and on Twitter, where our handle is @FrancoisF24. Before we get to the nuts and bolts of what happened today in Tripoli and Benghazi, let's talk about late-breaking news. We have a spokesperson for Libya's revolutionary forces saying a unit has entered the outskirts of Muammar Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. And I just want to begin by asking you, Wahid Bershan, have you any more news on this?
Well, yes, we had earlier indications that they're moving forward in terms of Sirte is concerned. But it's just the beginning, I must caution. Definitely the revolutionary forces are gaining ground. It's just a matter of time until it's completed. I must say it is very, very important and critical for our people to make sure that they go cautiously, that they consider themselves they are not invading another country, but these are our people, and it just to be cautious dealing with civilians and people's homes. So.
Wahid Bershan, Muammar Gaddafi's on the run. Why is there still resistance, in your view?
Well, clearly these are areas where he had presence for a long time. There's a lot of tribal allegiance to him. That's a fact. He was obviously was raised in that area, born, raised. His forces, when they were retreating and left Tripoli and most of the people, most of the areas in Libya, they have retreated to these points where he's from. So they are making the point that that they will not obviously give up these territories, and being among the populations, essentially they are holding these populations as hostages and making a point of fighting. So in order to force the revolutionary forces to use military means to free Libya, which is unfortunate.
Jean-Marie Fardeau, a comment on that. Do you have instances where local population in Libya has been held hostage?
Yes, there is a high probability that in the 3 cities where Gaddafi supporters are still having power, they are using citizens as human shields, and it's of course a violation of the law of war, the humanitarian international law, and we are very pleased to see leaders of TNC saying that they will be very cautious in attacking the city to make sure that the people will not suffer of these battles, and we hope that the damages on the civilians will be as limited as possible in this offensive. We deplore that the dialogue did not make possible a peaceful solution for these three cities.
All right, that's the situation in Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. Let's talk about the situation in Tripoli. At the outset, we showed you the welcome for David Cameron and Nicolas Sarkozy in Benghazi. Tripoli was no different. The two men, for instance, touring the wards at Tripoli Medical Center.
Now we have a good amount, but we still need more.
And are you managing to cope with the patients you have, or are you absolutely full?
Absolutely. And in case we can't manage it with some complicated case, we have now some countries who are accepting these patients.
We're going to do that today.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Take some of the most complicated cases, but you're coping with what you have at the moment. We are going to announce that they would take 50 of the most difficult cases. 50, so we can do complicated surgery, prosthetics.
There you hear David Cameron promising to take the 50 most difficult cases in that hospital. The issue always, as the NATO-led countries insist that they will not be intervening militarily on the ground, but in a sense, with these sorts of pledges, and I'll start with you, Jacques Millard, to a certain degree, do Britain and France own the conflict? That is to say, do they now have a huge responsibility towards the Libyans that goes beyond what they've done so far?
Well, first of all, this is true that it is a big sign that the Prime Minister and the French President go to Libya as soon as we can see. There is no doubt that it is a gesture that will count for the future. And as you've heard and seen, the crowd in Tripoli, the crowd in Benghazi, has really applauded those two head of states coming to them. And I think this is something which goes in the right direction. It doesn't mean, as you said earlier, that the task is over. I think it starts now. It's always not always very easy to win a war. It's, let's say, on a military basis, you don't ask yourself too much, you just battle, you just try to win. And this is what happened, and it is true that France and Britain have led this war almost without any mistake. Now, it's a rebuild of a nation. We have to make sure that the help, the aid that France and Britain has given to Libya goes into the right direction. That means to build up a democratic state with transparency, a Muslim state, of course, there is no doubt about that, but a democratic state. And this is the most difficult thing to do. Why? Because for 40 years, the Libyan people have lived under a dictatorship. And this is a rich country. That's a good point for Libya, of course. This is something which will help the people, especially because they have means to build a country. But they also have to experience a new parliamentary life, a new democratic life. And this is something, as we know, for years and years, that will take time.
Jeremy Corbyn, do you agree? France and the UK now have to accompany the Libyans.
Well, they've got to be seen not to be there for their own economic interests, such as the oil and gas and investments that are going to come from that. But they also, I think, have to understand, and I'm sure the TNC understand this, the need for national reconciliation, and so that the new Libya doesn't descend into chaos between fighting elements within the TNC and between former Gaddafi supporters and the TNC itself, because there are already disturbing reports both of human rights abuses by Gaddafi and his supporters, but also, unfortunately, there are some disturbing reports about the behaviour of some of the TNC forces, particularly towards African people who've been living in Libya.
Jean-Marie Fardeau?
Yes, I agree. The situation for the sub-Saharan people living in Tripoli and other cities at the beginning, after the when the forces of the CTNC took the city of Tripoli, during several days there were a lot of risks for the sub-Saharan African. They were taken in different neighborhoods, in stadium, in schools, but now they have been regrouped in one place and in very official prisons. So it seems the situation is a bit better, but many of them have been only been arrested because of their color and not because there are proof, evidences of participating in the war with Gaddafi. So the TNC has to ensure that those people will be either freed, or will be put under evidence that they have committed crimes with Gaddafi forces.
And to pick up again on what Jacques Miao was saying, it is a delicate balancing act. In Benghazi, the British and French leaders taking their bows with glee, while trying their darndest not to, again, own the conflict and its follow-up.
People in Britain salute your courage, and while we are proud of the role that we played to help, we know this was your revolution from your bravery, from people in Benghazi, people in Tripoli, people in Zlitan, people in Brega, people in Misrata. You showed the world you would get rid of a dictator and you would choose freedom.
People of Libya, you have shown your bravery. Today, you must show a different kind of courage. That is pardon and reconciliation.
The fear of infighting now between those that have ousted Gaddafi, expressed by Jeremy Corbyn, Waid Bershan. How big a fear is it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a concern, and I think this is concerns out of cautions not to fall into such a situation. I believe so far it has been relatively and reasonably well, I guess, lack of a better term here. It is very, very important for us to be aware that these things are possible. It is very important that we at the TNC need to make sure there's a mechanism on the ground that these things doesn't happen. And in terms of part of our stabilization plan is to have reconciliation. It is of utmost, and it's definitely part of the agenda. The immediate agenda of the TNC is to go through that process.
Stoking the fears, word that Tripoli's military governor is angling for the top job in Libya. He's a former jihadist. The New York Times quotes an aide to Abdelhakim Belhaj as saying that Mr. Jibril will, quote, be gone soon. The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, who was in Libya on Wednesday, said, I think it's something that everyone's watching, saying we aren't so far concerned that one group is going to be able to dominate the aftermath of what's been a shared struggle by the Libyan people. When you see that statement attributed to the entourage of Abdelhakim Belhaj, again, Waid Bershan, how much of a problem, image-wise, is Abdelhakim Belhaj at this point?
I would not. I mean, again, we see things on the ground. We look at the situations, what's happening. There is no questions that certain groups try to position themselves. He's one of them. At this point, at this juncture, we didn't see anything of certain behavior that are out of concern. However, just because of the background of the individuals and the history of it and so on, we all have to watch. And it's not just sort of like what Mr. Abdul Jalil said, the right or the Islamists, but also all sides, even the leftists. I mean, anybody who is out of the mainstream of Libya, we need to remind them of what Libya is all about, remind them of our way of life, and we need to make sure that they accommodate that space. So to answer your question directly, there's the current government or the formation of this coming government. It needs to be developed to account for all of these groups This is a country under formation. We need to make sure that we make the right steps and address everybody's concern. At this point, we don't see a problem. Cautions is of utmost important at this point.
All right, and Jacques Millard, are you heartened by what you hear Waheed Bershan saying?
Well, you know, we have a lot of question marks on the future. This is, of course, this country has to be built by the Libyans themselves. It is true that, you know, the rebels and this transitional council is not fully united, and there are different trends inside it. So we will see what happens. But as President Sarkozy several times mentioned, those who rebelled against Gaddafi did not do it on the basis of integrism, on the basis of let's say, Al-Qaeda movement. They did it on the basis of liberty, on the basis of freedom of speech and things like that. So I think we have a good chance, and this is the same case in Tunisia and as well in Egypt. We have a good chance today that those movements really takes the lead into a direction which is democracy. But of course, this is not one yet, and this will take time. I would like to say, as the British MP just said earlier, that of course for France and Britain, we have to accompany them, but we don't have to substitute to them, and we are not there only to make business. We are also there because we live around the lake, and this lake is the Mediterranean Sea. You know, it's very important that we have real acknowledgement of those nations. It's really important that we build cooperation links with them because we have a lot to solve together, and especially development.
Very briefly, Jeremy Corbyn, going forth, your reaction to what Jacques Millard said?
I think we have to be optimistic and very cautious at the same time. Only 6 months ago, some of the leaders of the TNC were sitting around cabinet tables with Gaddafi, and the TNC is a very disparate group, and the country has a vast supply of weapons of all types and descriptions, and I suspect many of the militia groups that have grown up in the past 6 months won't want to give up their weapons. So there's a very clear question of leadership and of direction of travel of the country and of respecting different opinions. I'm not clear how that's going to be played out. I'm not clear how that's going to work. It is a very volatile situation and could be very, very dangerous. This is the easy part today for Cameron Sarkozy. The hard part could be in 3 months and 6 months' time.
All right, too early to tell, perhaps, if it's a reference to what's going on in Libya for NATO. We'll be debating it when we come back. Stay with us.